Welcome back to Point of View. We are on the discussion on all matters ICC and international law and our judicial system right here in Kenya. With me in studio, for those of us joining us, is Mr. Edigah Kavulavu of the ICJ, International Commission of Jurists. Going back to our discussion, we're talking about justice, and you mentioned transitional justice. What is that?
Well, transitional justice basically means that it is a process undertaken when a country is coming from a place of war or dictatorship to self-rule or peace.
Okay.
And there have been certain mechanisms even before the International Criminal Court. For example, the International Criminal Tribunals of Yugoslavia. And we realized that after the world wars, there were quite a number of heinous crimes that were committed. And the world came to a realization that this cannot continue that way. And we have to put in place mechanisms to ensure that the impunity gap is bridged. And that is why now we have a permanent international criminal court.
Indeed.
And this permanent international criminal court is a states-based court. This means that states have to sign onto that treaty so that it is bound by that particular court. And the other thing that is very important to note as it relates to transitional justice and the ICC is that the ICC is a court of last resort. Okay. And it will be a win situation for the court if it doesn't have any case going on in that court. This will mean that state parties have effectively prosecuted international crimes. So it is not the wish of the court to have crimes or cases going on at that court. And then we realize that the International Criminal Court does not have an international police. So it relies heavily on states' cooperation. If, for example, we need documents, the court needs documents regarding the arrest of an accused person, then a state has to prosecute. And we realize that whenever states are involved in anything, it gets very political.
Indeed.
And that is why the ICC has been a very political court. We can't talk about justice without talking about the politics of the day. But again, as a citizen of this country, we have to open our eyes and our ears and listen to our government even when they are discussing at the African Union and see whether whatever they're discussing is for the best interest of the common mananchi. They will talk about the heads of states, but will they talk about the victims of these crimes? You find that these crimes are very heinous.
Indeed.
And they're committed by army commanders. It is very difficult to prosecute army commanders at the domestic level. And that is why we look outside. That is why maybe we look at the African court, which is yet to be established. But again, as I said, if we have an African court that cannot prosecute heads of states, it will be very difficult to bridge the impunity gap.
Indeed.
It will be very difficult to bring to book those persons who orchestrate such crimes.
It beats its purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. You talked about the ICTY, and I want to bring it a bit locally to the ICTR. And we know what happened in Rwanda. We had the genocide going on. And I want us to highlight the issue of restorative and retributive justice. First and foremost, what do these two entail? And in the situation in Rwanda, do you think this was established? Do you think this was attained?
Well, the ICTR is going through its residual mechanisms. The ICTR is based in Arusha, and it is trying some of the warlords who were involved in the genocide. And in any criminal process, not only international but also at the local level, it's very important that we have put in place mechanisms that ensure, in as much as we bring to book the persons who committed the crimes, we also restore the social fabric. Because during war, you find that very many people are raped, people are defiled, people lose their loved ones. Therefore, you need to restore the community to a state in which it was even before the war. Therefore, I must say that going by the pillars of criminal prosecution, it is out there to punish those who commit those crimes. It is out there to restore the community, the victims, to a state in which they were before the commission of these crimes. And in as much as these people commit these crimes, you find that we are all human beings. They're also human beings.
Yes.
And whenever they are put in jail or in custody, the process should be in such a way that this person, in the event that he is reintegrated in the community, he can be able to fit. And he can be able to accept it back to the community. Going by the situation in Rwanda, we had the Gasheshe courts, which was very key on ensuring that there is cohesion within the community. You find that people forgave each other. And another situation would be, for example, in Uganda, where there was amnesty. The persons who committed these crimes were told to come out openly, apologize, and then they will be forgiven. So these are all mechanisms of transitional justice.
Indeed.
As a country, and being a Kenyan,
Yes.
you realize that justice means very many things for very many people. If that woman in Kibera, let's take an example of Kibera, whereby a person has been raped. Maybe one woman from a particular community will just want a forgiveness, an apology.
Indeed. Come forward, say, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Because if this lady goes out and says that I was raped, she might be an outcast.
Yes.
So what she wants is just an apology. There's that other person who does not even want an apology. I don't even want the property that I lost. I want this person to be arrested. So you see, the criminal justice mechanisms should be crafted in such a manner that it can cover all these needs of the victims. Because at the end of the day, we need to focus on the real victims. Let us focus on the real victims of the situation. Because, I'm sorry to say this, but in Kenya, we have focused so much on the accused persons as opposed to the victims.
It's true. It's very true. Oh, okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the victims. So what happens for the Kenyan victims? We've had the others in the other situations go through both the retributive and restorative process in Rwanda, in South Africa. We've had them heal. I feel that we have that element missing here in our Kenyan situation. We have the ICC cases, they're going on, but what happens to the healing element? What happens to our victims here locally?
I agree with you totally, Linda, that the healing process has been lacking. And after the post-election violence, you realize we had two types of victims. We had the case victims and we had the situation victims. The case victims are the ones who participated in court.
Okay.
They are the ones who went to give testimony. And then we have the situation victims, the victims who atrocities were committed against them, but they could not participate in court. When the early case was dropped, you realize that there were case victims, but since the case was dropped, now we have situation victims. But as a country, you realize that the buck stops with the government to ensure that these victims are compensated. In as much as the cases are going on at the ICC or at the African Court or at the ICTR, the government has the sole responsibility to ensure that these persons are compensated.
Okay.
We had the Cohesion Commission,
yes,
which was to ensure that the Kenyan communities are cohesive. One of the major ailments that you're suffering as a country is that of tribalism.
Indeed. There's a lot of ethnicity.
Yeah, and then there's hate speech. So this commission came into existence so as to curb these vices in our society. I still feel that in the advent of the new media, Twitter and Facebook, you can see a lot of hate speech still going on.
True.
You'll see that there's still a lot of cohesion that needs to be done amongst the Kenyan communities.
Indeed, indeed. And I think it's an area that requires a lot of work. And thank you very much, Mr. Kavulavu. Very insightful, very informative discussion we've had. We were talking about the ICC and the state of the Kenyan judicial system with regard to these cases. Now, we have seen and we have established that there are plenty of steps for us to take as a country to move in the positive direction to ensure that we are healed as a nation. Will the steps be established? Will we have gone through the correct processes? Only time will tell. Mr. Kavulavu over here is with the International Commission of Jurists, a transitional justice expert and a program officer at the organization. Thank you for joining us. I have been your host, Linda Kruger. Remember, keep it point of view.